people waiting already, and we could start. So I'm waiting for the admin Nadar to start streaming. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I would like to ask you to leave like any pluses or just write yes if you could hear me well. So yes, I could see that you could hear me well. So I would like to welcome everyone and thanks for joining. Basically, how we will do is that you could write your comments and questions in the chat that you could see down below. So yeah, someone of you already wrote something there. So you could leave questions there. And in the end, I'll select the most interesting questions and ask them to Mikko. And basically, he'll answer them. So I suggest to start. So Mikko is a renowned cybersecurity specialist. He has more than 20 or 25 years of experience. He is basically with the antivirus company F-Secure since 1991. And he agreed to share his knowledge, his experience in this time of war against Ukraine, launched from Russia, basically, and share his experience with cybercrime and how we could protect ourselves and basically all the relevant information. I'll note that this event is for free, but you could donate money using the link below, which we'll send to the Ukrainian army, to the volunteers, and we'll provide a report afterwards from that. So I would like to give my word to Mikko. So Mikko, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yuri. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. Thanks for joining us during these unusual and serious times. Indeed, my name is Mikko. I've been working with computer security, information security, and online privacy all my life. Started programming when I was a teenager, sold my first programs when I was 17 years old, and for the last 31 years I've been working in information security, doing tracking of organized online crime gangs, but also tracking of nation states and attacks coming from governments, including intelligence agencies and militaries. And I'm coming to you live from Helsinki, Finland. I'm a Finn. I've lived all my life in Finland, but I've spent the last 30 years going around the world and trying to figure out exactly how the world is changing and how we can defend ourselves. Now, many of you don't remember the time before the internet. Some of you do. Of course, I do. I was born in the 1960s, so I will very well remember the Cold War years and the time before the internet. But the fact is, we're right now living in the middle of a revolution. And it's kind of hard to see when big changes are happening, when you are living in the middle of these changes, what they really mean. But the fact is that technology is now changing the world faster than ever before. Internet is changing the world faster than anything ever before. And it's changing the world for the better, but it's also changing the world for the worse. Internet is the best and the worst innovation of our time. The upsides are clear. I mean, we are having this meeting right now over the internet. We are able to communicate, to run our businesses. We have all sorts of entertainment, all sorts of communication, thanks to internet. But we are also seeing all the downsides, like the fact that borders disappear mean that borders disappear for good and for bad. they disappear for criminals, they disappear for foreign aggression, they disappear in cases of conflicts and in cases of war. Suddenly, these distances don't matter anymore. Now, obviously, during this aggressive war waged by Russia on Ukraine, we've seen plenty of cyberspace activity and use of cyber weapons to wage cyber war. But I want to be really clear. I don't want to overemphasize the importance of cyber war in the middle of this war. Sure, over the last 47 days, we've seen war being waged in all the domains where war can be waged today. That means land war, sea war, air war, space war, and cyberspace war. But we must not overemphasize the importance of cyber war or cyber weapons or cyber attacks. While they definitely have happened, most of the activity we have seen, at least from my viewpoint, has been in the real world. Real world is where people die. Real world is where people suffer. And while we have seen extraordinary things happen in the online world, that's still just the online world. And everything I've been able to see during the first 47 days of this conflict within the cyberspace domain tells me what I already knew about Ukraine, which is that Ukraine is one of the best countries in Europe to defend its own networks. Yes, Ukraine has large networks which are hard to defend, but what makes you different from all other countries in Europe is that you've been defending your networks for very real, very practical attacks coming from Russia already for many years. And that's the difference between Ukraine and Germany or France or Italy or the Nordic countries or my home country of Finland. Sure, we try to build our defenses as well. Of course we do. We understand that there's a big neighbor right across the border. But when we build our defenses and when we do and test our defenses, we are playing tabletop exercises and war games against theoretical attacks. What your defenders have been doing for the last 8 years is defending against real attacks. Not make-believe, not tests, nothing theoretical about the attacks. And they always say that once you do something long enough, you become an expert. You do anything for 10,000 hours and you are a world-class expert. You want to be a world-class violin player, play the violin for 10,000 hours and you're world-class. Your defenders have done their 10,000 hours of defending your infrastructure. And there are, of course, big challenges in defending your infrastructure and your networks. There's tons of legacy systems in Ukrainian networks. Big part of your critical infrastructure is owned by private companies, which are all defending their own networks without centralized control. And you're defending against the biggest country on the planet. And when many of these systems are running legacy operating systems or outdated software, defense becomes even harder. With all those things against you, the biggest thing for you in this defense is your practical experience, having done that for so many years against real attacks. Now, like I mentioned, we Finns here, we have a big neighbor just like you do. Let me actually turn on my slides. So let's have a look at the world map. Your border is roughly 1,970 kilometers with the Russians. We Finns, we have a little bit less, only 1,300 kilometers of border. But of course, they're both big enough borders with the biggest country on the planet. Finland has had a long and problematic history with our big neighbor, just like you have. Both my grandfathers fought the Russians in the Second World War, the Winter War, as we call it, in between Finland and Russia. As an end result, both my grandfathers, who are dead now, hated the Russians all the way until to their graves. My father, he's 74, he's still alive. He doesn't hate the Russians, but he doesn't like the Russians. I'm the third generation, or the second generation after the war. I'm a bit over 50 now. I have no strong feelings to the people of Russia. I know lots of peaceful people of Russia, but of course, I have very strong negative feelings about the leaders of Russia. The leaders of Russia want to wage war against the whole world, and they are starting from their neighbors. And we are those neighbors just like you are. Now, of course, you are in a war. We are not. We're living in deep peace. We're safe right now. But we worry about the future. And that's why we are following very carefully about what's happening in Ukraine and want to support you in any way we can. That's why Finland has been active in providing indirect and direct support. We can't fight for you, but we can help you fight. And we have a feeling of togetherness with the people of Ukraine. That's why I'm wearing my pocket square, to show support and stand with Ukraine. In fact, I even started watching the Sluha Navrodu series. They show it here in Finnish TV. I watched the first 3 episodes of the first season, and then I skipped to the end to watch how it ended. Very eye-opening and entertaining. You have a great leader. You should be proud and happy that you have a leader who's able to lead you during a wartime. Wartime leaders are hard to come by, but you seem to have what's needed to lead you through these crises. It's not a crisis, it's a war. You are in a war, an unjust war waged on you by an aggressor. That's where you are. Now, I've worked with Ukrainians, Ukrainian programmers, Ukrainian developers, Ukrainian testers, people with great technological skills. I have great impression of the technical skills of the people that I worked with from Ukraine. I run Ukrainian software myself, including apps from Riado, for example, like those type of applications, which I didn't even realize are made in Ukraine until the war started, and apps on my phone and on my iPad started showing flags on me, and I realized that surprisingly large amount of the technology we use is coming from Ukraine. So technology shapes the world. It shapes the way we live our lives and how we fight our wars. And it's quite clear that we are becoming dependent on all of this technology, which is the way it's supposed to be. During the pandemic time, I wrote a book, and in that book, I tried figuring out exactly where we are and what's the far future going to look like. And the situation where we are right now is in many ways exactly the same situation where our great-grandfathers were 150 years ago. You see, 150 years ago, around 1870, that's the time when most European capitals started receiving electricity grids, including Helsinki and including Kyiv. In 1870s, both of these capitals got their first electricity grids, typically first by replacing the gas lights around the streets of the capital with electric lights. That's how it starts. Now, our great-grandfathers who started building electricity grids probably realized that if this technology, if this new innovation, electricity, is successful, eventually it's going to be mandatory. eventually societies won't function without electricity because people can't communicate, factories won't work, people can't move around. Yet they made the bold decision and bold call to go ahead and start implementing this new technology of electricity. And of course, we became dependent on electricity because it's so useful. Again, we wouldn't be having this meeting without electricity. Today, when there is a blackout, power cut, modern societies stop. Factories stop running. And if the power cut is long enough, it becomes very serious. Now, we are making exactly the same kind of decision for future generations right now. Not about electricity, but about connectivity, about internet. I still remember the time before the internet. It's becoming more and more mandatory for anything we do. Eventually, most of our devices, eventually none of our devices won't be able to function without internet connectivity. That's still going to take some time. It's going to take some decades, but eventually connectivity will be as mandatory as electricity. In fact, I forecast that one day when there's an internet cut is going to cut power. Just like today, if there's a power cut, it's going to cut internet because routers don't work without power. What I'm saying, eventually, maybe in a decade, maybe in two, when there's a cut in connectivity, that's going to cut power. That's how interdependent our systems are going to be. And yet, this is the right call. Yet, this is what we should be doing. We should be embracing this new technology, just like our great-grandfathers embraced electricity, and they made the right decision. Yes, we are very dependent on it now, but the upsides are so much bigger than the downsides. And when we embrace connectivity, the upsides for that will be much bigger than the downsides. But we should be aware that we are making this decision. It's us making this decision. Our generations, you and me, we are making this decision for all future generations. Because internet just happened to happen during our time. Mankind has walked this planet for 100,000 years without the internet. And from now on, internet will be part of mankind's future forever. Forever. It just happened to start during our time. When someone 500 years from now writes a history book and describes the early 2000s, our time, the first thing that historian will mention about us will be that these were the first people who got online. That's how we will be remembered. The first generations in mankind's history who started living their lives both in the real world and in the online world. So the upsides of connectivity are clear. We're getting all these benefits. The downsides include the fact that privacy has died, online crime has gone through the roof, spying by intelligence agencies has more and more expanded from the real world into the online world, and sabotage and warfare have moved online. Cyber weapons and cyber war are often quite complicated terms. Like, what do we actually mean by cyber war? Well, typically it's problematic, but not always. For example, one of the most famous cyber weapons in history, Stuxnet. That's the attack launched by the United States and Israel targeting the nuclear enrichment systems in Iran. That's very often used as an example of a cyber weapon and cyber war when it actually wasn't cyber war. You see, there was no war. USA and Israel were not at war with Iran when they launched that cyber weapon against Iran. So it wasn't cyber war. It was cyber sabotage. And what we are seeing now and have been seeing for the last years in Ukraine is cyber war, because there is a war. When you have a war between two countries and one of the countries is using their technology to attack computer systems in another country, what the hell else could we call it than cyber war? Of course, it is cyber war. But all these terms are mostly for academic interest. The real thing to know about cyber weapons and cyber war is that from the attacker's point of view, online attacks and cyber attacks make a lot of sense. Cyber weapons are efficient. Cyber weapons are effective. Cyber weapons are affordable. And cyber weapons are deniable. A weapon which is effective, affordable, deniable. Effective, it gets the job done. Affordable, it's cheaper than a real weapon. And deniable. You can deny that it wasn't you. And then, maybe even more importantly, a weapon which can be used by anyone. Traditional real-world weapons are only used by soldiers. Sure, anybody can carry a rifle, but if you think about something like an aircraft carrier or a fighter jet, private citizens don't have aircraft carriers or fighter jets. They are only used by armies. But then when you look at online world, very powerful attack technologies are at the hands of civilians and can be used to make a difference. And that's what makes online weapons and cyber war so different. When the war started, your politicians went online to recruit foreigners to join the fight. Join the fight online. Use your technical skills to attack targets in Russia. Join the IT army of Ukraine. Come to our Telegram channel and we'll give you targets. We've never seen that in any other conflict. Ukrainian cyber police went online to collect donations by selling NFTs and accepting money donations in Moneros, which I've only before this seen used by criminals. We've never seen that before either. Your IT army people are using face recognition technologies to scan the faces of dead Russian soldiers, find their social media profiles, and then inform the next of kin and relatives and parents of the dead soldier before their own officials do it, shifting the public opinion in Russia against the war. We've never seen that either. These are completely new ways of using technology during wartime. Using technology during wartime. This photo was sent to me. It was taken yesterday at downtown Helsinki. Actually, someone told me that you have Hesburger in Ukraine as well, which I didn't know. It's a Finnish burger chain. But the overall support from people of Finland for people of Ukraine is very much in there. Absolutely.
I'm sorry, Mikko. Could you please, because we can't see it in. Oh yeah, we can see it. Sorry for the interruption. So yeah,
okay.
That's what we see. Thank you.
Maybe there's a bit of a delay in my slides.
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. So, like I mentioned earlier, modern conflicts are played out in multiple different domains at the same time. When we think about history, when we think about the kind of wars mankind used to fight hundreds of years ago, they were restricted by technology. Originally, the kind of technology we had to wage our wars meant that we were having wars with swords and bow and arrow because we didn't have better technology until we got guns, which changed the warfare quite permanently. And we got technology like warships, which expanded the war to a new domain, sea war. And then we got new technology to build airplanes, which expanded the war to a new domain, air war. And then we get satellites, space war, and now cyberspace war. But the thing about these new domains in waging war and fighting wars is that none of the new domains which we have entered have made the old domains to disappear. When warships were invented, that didn't make land war go away. War simply expanded from land to sea, and then to space, and then cyberspace. And that's exactly what we're seeing happening. War is being waged in all of these domains at the same time. And the fifth domain, the cyberspace domain, is not going to be the last domain. Technology will continue to shape the wars we fight. I have no idea what the sixth domain will be. What I do know is that it will sound like science fiction, just like cyber war would have sounded like science fiction 30 years ago. But it's very real and it's happening right now. And the thing I can't understand about Russia and this war is the logic of trying to infiltrate all of Ukraine, starting this insane war. You see, for the last 10 years or more, Russia had the winning cards in their hands. Look at what the operations Russian agencies looked like for the last 10 years. They were targeting with their information operations and hybrid operations and propaganda operations leaderships and citizens of the West, and they were successful in their attacks. They were able to infiltrate Western social media networks and use their troll factories to shape opinions of people in the West. They were able to buy access through ad targeting systems to exactly the people they wanted to target. And then they used psychological operations to shape opinions and to turn people against each other. Look at the United States with Democrats and Republicans further away than ever before, with the capital of their of Washington D.C. getting run over by mobs. Look at how United Kingdom left EU because of the surprise end result of the Brexit vote. These are the kinds of operations that Russians were masterminding, and they were winning. The West was more broken than ever before. The West was fighting within more than ever before. EU was in a crisis. Russia was winning. And then on the 24th of February, they took their winning cards and they threw them into trash by invading Ukraine. Everything they had been building for the last 10 years went down the toilet. The West, EU, United States, and the rest of the world, which was really dismantled and disorganized, pulled together. Everybody made up their mind about what's important. Everyone is against Russia and everybody wants to support Ukraine. This is not what Russia wanted. This is a crude misplay and misreading of the situation. They had the winning cards and they threw them away. I can't understand that, but that's exactly what happened. Right now, the most important thing Europe can do to support Ukraine in this conflict is to stop buying coal, oil, and gas from Russia. And they can only do that if they can replace the power generation with something else. So how can we generate power in Europe without buying Russian coal, oil, or gas? Well, nuclear, that's a great choice. I'm a big fan of nuclear energy. Or renewables. Solar energy, well, I'm in Finland. Solar doesn't work too well over here because we have a very long and snowy winter. Well, you know all about snowy winters in Ukraine as well. But wind is good. So this is a press release put out last week, 9 days ago, by a German company, one of the largest manufacturers of wind turbines in the world and largest operators of wind farms. They announced that they have a cybersecurity incident. Well, that's actually not accurate. They don't have a cybersecurity incident. According to our information, they've been hit with ransomware. Russian ransomware. When the war started on the 24th of February, on the 25th of February, or let's say by 25th of February, within the first 24 hours, 3 well-known Russian ransomware gangs made announcements on their websites. They all operate websites in Tor hidden service. Conti, Lockbit, and Trickbot announced that in this conflict they will be supporting their motherland of Russia, and they will use their know-how, their expertise, their knowledge, and their tools to attack targets in the West and to retaliate these sanctions, unjustified sanctions that have been imposed on Russia. That's what they were saying. As soon as these gangs made the announcement, we started seeing surprising activity. 2 of these ransomware gangs started breaking up from the inside, with insiders, members of these gangs, who started leaking information about other gang members. These gangs are big. They make revenues in hundreds of millions of US dollars. I'm not joking. That's how big they are. And they have, well, roughly 100 members in each of them. And the gang leaders probably were not truly aware who their members are, because some of the members supported Ukraine. And when they saw these announcements that the gang they're working with is now supporting Russia, they started leaking information about other gang members, including photos, real world names, phone numbers, things like that. Yet the attack targeting this company right here is going on like nothing had happened, even though members of this particular gang have been doxxed and their names are out on the internet. How is this possible? How can a ransomware gang continue operating when 20% of their members have been burned? Well, the answer is simple. They can carry on because they are being protected. They are being protected by Russian government. These guys don't have to worry about cops coming, knocking on their doors. The cops will never come. The cops will never come to their doors. They're being protected by their own government, even though they break laws and target innocent companies. These kind of gangs are also able to bring in cryptocurrencies from the West into Russia. And that's crucial in this situation when the value of ruble is what it is, and sanctions are heavily restricting the flow of money through SWIFT and other banking networks, and when all the big Russian banks have been sanctioned from operating in the West. Well, cryptocurrencies are a different story. You see, rubles and hrvati and dollars and euros, real world currencies, they aren't actually based on anything. A long time ago, currencies were based on value of gold, but that hasn't been the case for many decades. So currencies, real world currencies, are based on just the fact that we've agreed that they have value. Cryptocurrencies are a different story. Cryptocurrencies are based on math. Real world currencies are based on nothing. Cryptocurrencies are based on math. Which means if you want to regulate and sanction real world currencies, you can do that. Because it's a game of politics. But you cannot regulate or sanction math. If you try to sanction or regulate math, math will ignore you. It's sort of like trying to regulate that the value of pi is not 3.14 but 4.14. Math will ignore that regulation, and the value of pi will still be 3.14 forever. That's the way math works. And this is why unsanctionable cryptocurrencies are so valuable to Russia right now. That's why they protect ransomware gangs hitting targets like these. And a target like this is sort of like a double whammy. If they pay the ransom, and we have no information that these would have paid any ransom, but if victims in the West pay the ransom in Bitcoin, they get unsanctionable currency in Russia. And in this case, they're also affecting the power generation in Europe, which is exactly what Europe needs to do in order to stop buying Russian oil, gas, and coal. And then we have other surprising things happening. I'm showing an example from Finland. This is a Twitter account of a fellow Finn. The difference is that this guy doesn't exist. The name here is very typical Finnish name, but this guy doesn't exist. He tweeted on the 19th of March that he and his friends have developed a ransomware, and now they've been targeting Russian military systems, including Russian chopper operational systems with a ransomware. And this is not true. None of this has actually happened. Which then poses the question, why would anyone tell stories like this if this hasn't actually happened? Why would someone say that as a Finn from Finland, they would be targeting Russian military systems during a time when Russia is at war? Well, we don't really know. I don't really know. But of course, it would be a great excuse for Russia to then use power against Finland. Look at these Finns targeting our military systems while we are in a wartime situation. We must defend ourselves and use force against Finland. Now, we don't know if that's the case in this case, but these things worry me about this situation and the risk of escalation in this situation. Now, this Tommy guy wasn't real, but there's plenty of very real people joining in to this fight. People in Ukraine and people outside of Ukraine, civilians who are using their technical skills to do what they can to support Ukraine. People around the world are breaking their local laws to attack Russian targets to try to support Ukraine. Now, of course, I'm not encouraging anybody to do anything at all. I'm not encouraging people to break the law, but I totally understand why people are doing that. And of course, people within Ukraine are not breaking any laws when they are waging a war against Russia, because it is a war, regardless of the fact if they're waging war in real world or in the online world. When you are at war, rules that normally apply don't apply. During normal time, it's illegal to shoot someone with a weapon. During wartime, well, that's normal. During peacetime, it's illegal to hack into foreign systems. During wartime, if it's your aggressor, it's not. I'm not a lawyer, but that's the basic gist of it. But when we're doing, when we're looking at these people, it's crucial that they understand what they're doing. The risk of getting caught might be that you get caught for your local government if you're operating from outside of Ukraine, or that you get caught to Russian authorities. Regardless of the situation, when people engage in aggression against Russia, it's probably a good idea to stay away from Russia for the rest of your world. I think that's pretty obvious, but I think it also needs to be said. The likelihood of getting caught for online attacks or hacks or denial of service attacks is very low, but it does exist. Most of the attacks we've seen have been denial of service attacks. And denial of service attacks are very simple, blunt instruments which simply overload connections. Connections could be connections to a web server or a voice over IP gateway or an email server or whatever. And although these attacks are very crude and very simple, they're also quite effective. For example, when banking networks are being targeted, and if the end result is that people can't pay or their credit card doesn't work, well, that is very effective then. These attacks also open doors for more powerful attacks from governmental players. For example, Western governments are scared about using their cyber offensive power against Russia in the sense that they don't want things to escalate. They don't want things to become a direct war between their countries and Russia. However, in this situation, when we are filled with this fog of cyber war, and dozens of attacks are coming from individual civilians and civilian groups, it actually opens doors for governments to use this confusion to join in. And even if they get caught, they can just claim that, that's anonymous or whatever. Clearly that wasn't us. That zero-day attack into the IT systems of the Kremlin, yeah, it's probably anonymous. They're really clever nowadays. So it gives plausible deniability for governmental attacks. Then again, at the same time, these hobbyist or civilian attacks could cause problems for real governmental attacks. It's hard to break into a server, even if you have a vulnerability which would get you in there, if the server is taken down by a civilian denial of service attack. It's really hard to synchronize all of this because there's so much confusion and so many different players out there in the field. One thing which is clear, though, is that OPSEC, operational security, is the thing that really should be in everybody's mind during these times, especially if you are participating in offensive attacks against the aggressor. So here in this slide, this is Kali Linux. I'm guessing some of you are running it, maybe running it right now. When doing something that you want to keep hidden, you really should be using operating systems that protect you better than Windows or OS X. Booting into operating systems like Kali will make sure that everything you do on your device is much harder to track back to you, and you can destroy all the evidence of whatever happened during your sessions in these instances. So in practice, you would be booting from a USB thumb drive running a Linux installation on your laptop, and anything you do will stay within that session. That's fairly easy to do with your computers, but you can't do the same thing with your mobile phones. It gets much more complicated. Another thing that is important is to hide your tracks in the network. Use Tor, use VPN. Easy to say, but for example, Tor is a system which will restrict your bandwidth so severely that you can't do many things at all. VPNs restrict bandwidth as well, but not as badly. Now, I've worked with VPN systems for quite a while, and it's they have their limits, but they're very useful, and I do recommend people to run VPNs. If you're not sure which VPN to use, well, Algo VPN is something you can install on your own server and operate by yourself if you have the technical know-how to do it. Now, a big part of the communication during this conflict has been in online chats, especially in mobile phone chats, on platforms like Telegram. And by the way, Telegram is a really impressive piece of technology. The IT Army of Ukraine channel has almost 300,000 people on the channel. Let me repeat that. 300,000 people on the channel. I can't name any other system which would handle 300,000 people than Telegram. Telegram isn't perfect. It's far from perfect, especially the default settings for security could clearly be better. But it's a remarkable piece of technology. And no wonder people are using it. And of course, the people behind Telegram are in exile from Russia themselves. They ran into problems with the Russian government many years ago. So regarding your mobile phones, well, it's easy for me to say this, but I do recommend iPhones. It's much easier to secure your iPhone or iPad than your Android device or your Android tablet. There's a couple of reasons why this. But I guess the main point is Google is an ad agency. They make their money by collecting profiles about us and selling that to highest bidder. Apple is not an ad agency. Apple's business model is selling overpriced hardware to us. So it's not in their interest to collect information about us, and it's in their interest to position themselves as the anti-Google. And when Google is collecting all this information about us, Apple is not. So for example, when you use Apple Pay with your Apple Watch or your Apple phone, Apple is not collecting information about the payments. And it's really easy to see that that information would be valuable. Like what are users buying, when and where? That's really easy to turn into money. But Apple is not collecting that information. Google, of course, is. Of course. But Apple isn't. Sure, iDevices can be hacked and have been hacked. Sure, but it's very expensive. Acquiring one-click or no-click 0 days for iOS or iPadOS costs you hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. Yes, they do exist. Yes, they've been used against victims, but those victims are special. Jeff Bezos was targeted with something like that, and he's not like you and me. Normal users are not targeted with 0 days, especially not targeted with mobile phone 0 days. Another thing to keep in mind is to make sure that our email channels are secure. Why is email so important? Because email can be used to reset your credentials to most other services. When you register to different online services, you typically register with your email. And then if someone gains access to your email, they can log into all of those services by clicking the "I have forgotten my password" button, which will send a new password to your email. That's why of all the passwords you have, the most important one to have, really long and strong and secure and unique, is the password to your email. Even though it might be Gmail or whatever, Hotmail, regardless of that, that's the crucial. The one you use to register to different services, make sure that password can never be guessed or stolen by anyone. And if the password to your email is crucial, so is the passcode to your mobile device. On your device, you have a PIN code for your SIM and then a passcode for your mobile access. And neither of these have to be short. The default on these devices is very short. You don't have to use the default. You can have it as long as you want. My passcode to my mobile device is 12 or 13 characters. And it's not numbers. It's numbers and letters. And that is the most important line of defense. What about things like Face ID or fingerprint readers? They're fine. I use them myself. The level of security provided by these kind of Face ID technologies is good enough, and they bring so much more usability to your device. If you have two options, option number one is use Face ID, easily unlocking your phone, or having a delay of 5 minutes before you have to re-enter your passcode because it's just not convenient to have entered over and over again, then of course it's much better to have the Face ID enabled and lock the device immediately every time you push the button. It's always a balance between usability and security. And then it's important to make sure that you keep your systems up to date, not just your computers and operating systems, but your mobile device and your mobile apps. Almost always when you get an update, it's about security. It's not about the new features and emojis. It's about the security you get. And you should really use that. And keep your devices safe and unjailbroken, unless you create the jailbreak yourself. If you're good enough to do your own jailbreaks, then you're good to go. Then you know how to secure your own device. If you're using someone else's jailbreak, it's not a good idea from security point of view. And then make sure you are up to date with your backups as well. And one practical tip I want to give as well is that if you are in a tough position, learn to lock your device. If it's an iPhone, like I have an iPhone here running the latest operating system, this is an iPhone 10, pressing the power button together with a volume button will simply turn off Face ID. So if someone mugs me and takes my phone, they can't unlock this by showing it to me on force. Learn to do it automatically when you end up in a tough situation. OPSEC matters. because we want to protect ourselves. But what matters even more is the attitude. I'm proud of the people of Ukraine about the attitude you have and the fact that you are standing up and defending your country, because you're not just defending yourselves, you're defending us as well. When you're defending yourselves, we understand very well that you are standing up and defending the rest of Europe. And let me be very clear about this. One day, hopefully soon enough, this war will be over. One day, the war will be over. And when the war is over, the whole world will come to rebuild Ukraine. The whole world will want to do business with Ukraine. You'll have the whole world's sympathies on your side. And that means that after the war, Ukraine will rise. Ukraine will rise and Russia will not. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mikko, for the wonderful presentation. And so everyone are welcome to post the questions. I've seen already some discussions in the chat, some active discussions there in the section. So if you like, you could ask additional questions. I've seen a really good example of people answering questions of each other, which I really like. So one really good question that I've read there is, it reads like this. So in Western countries, is it legal to download, store, and share the massive data leaks from Russian citizens and companies spread by anonymous group? Those have like lots of personal and commercial data. What do you think about that?
Yeah, the answer is no, it's not legal. Sure, people do it. I see why people do it. I understand why people do it. Obviously, I cannot recommend that because it is illegal by the local laws in all EU countries. It breaks the privacy regulation and breaks the criminal laws as well. Sure, it's happening a lot, and I see why it's happening. Mm-hmm. That doesn't change the fact that it's illegal.
Okay, that makes sense. Cool. So the other thing is, what is the best way to conceal personal content communication on phones? It's especially important for the people on territories which are occupied, because the invaders basically literally check the mobile phones of people on the roads when they stop them. So they basically take the phones and ask them to unlock them and show all the messages they have and everything. So yeah.
Use Signal and change the timeout of auto deletion of messages to hours or 1 day or 1 week, depending on your use case. That means Signal will automatically delete the messages from your chat after a certain time. There are similar settings in other tools like WhatsApp and Telegram as well. I have no experience of them, but with Signal it works very efficiently. It doesn't just delete the messages, it wipes them, and there's no record of those messages being sent ever before. That's for chat. But then of course, there's information you need to be able to access, so you don't want it to be deleted. And there, the solution is to store it in cloud storage. For example, on iPhone, you can store it in iCloud and keep it only in the cloud instance, hidden behind a password, which means there's no information on your device whatsoever. And then when you want, you can separately download and unencrypt the information from a safe place. So the practical usability of having access to the information is still there, but there's nothing incriminating physically on the device, for example, when you're crossing borders or getting interrogated.
Okay, that makes sense. So my personal questions, like about the Telegram chat. So it's really, really widespread, especially here in Ukraine. And I was always wondering, so they claim obviously to have like end-to-end security of the chats and everything, but could it be actually validated that it is true and it's not been actually stored somewhere, the information about the communication and everything, especially by the fact that the founder of Telegram is a former founder of vk.com and is from Russia. So what are your perspectives on this?
Okay, first of all, my opinion on Pavel Durov and Telegram, my attitude towards him is the same. My attitude towards Telegram is the same as my attitude towards Google. 50% of the founders of Google are Russian. All right? 50% of the founders of Google are Russian. Sure, Pavel Durov is Russian. He's not in Russia. He was actually living here in Finland for quite a while when they started developing Telegram. Right now, as far as I know, he's living somewhere in the United Arab Emirates. He has all the reasons to be angry at the Russian government. I don't think he's made any deals to work with the Russian government. If he has, we have no evidence of that. Just like we have no evidence that Google would be working with the Russian government, even though 50% of the founders of Google are Russian. It's important not to go full paranoid and think that everyone who has any link to Russia in any sense would be working for the Kremlin, because clearly that's not the case. Then about technical security of Telegram itself, these big channels with lots of people on them, there's no security. They are not encrypted end to end. They can't be with hundreds of thousands of users. That simply is not the case. There's no other security there either. They are perfectly open groups. Anybody can join them and see all the discussion. So we shouldn't expect any security there at all. When you use Telegram for one-to-one chats, you can enable secret chats, and that is end-to-end encrypted, but you have to enable it separately. And if you go that route, I would already switch from Telegram to Signal. Signal is more trusted than Telegram. There really is no reason to use Telegram for like one-to-one secret chats, because then you might as well use Signal. For these big groups, there really aren't other practical solutions than Telegram, as far as I know.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. One interesting question, like what is the safest place to save passwords? Is it apps like 1Password or piece of paper?
Well, even paper is much better than using the same password everywhere. And of course, we nowadays have to remember too many passwords. We cannot remember them all. Of course, you have to use some. If you don't use a password manager, then you have weak passwords. And a paper password manager is better than weak passwords. Of course, I recommend good, strong password management software like 1Password or LastPass. We have our own product called Key, but still, password managers which are able to store your information so that it's not put into a cloud service somewhere where it can be stolen from, that's not a good idea. Having a service which synchronizes your passwords between your devices, so they're stored encrypted on your devices, and what the password manager does is that it synchronizes them between your own devices, but it doesn't store them anywhere. So they can't be stolen from the password company themselves. That's a good idea. That's the kind of password managers I would recommend.
Okay, that makes sense. So I guess it'll be like a last question. So is it legal to create botnets from Russian computers if you're a citizen without the privileges?
If you're a citizen without privilege, okay, like I'm assuming this means like a foreigner, like outside of Ukraine. Do you think that's the question?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I'm not sure if.
No, it's an easy. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm confident that is illegal. Okay. People living in war zone have different rules. People living outside of war zones have to comply with their local laws and regulations. And building botnets, I'm afraid, is illegal.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. I guess we are sharply in time, so I would really like to thank you for your support and presentation and sharing your thoughts on these matters. I would like to also thank every participant, especially those who had like questions and intensive discussions. I guess we'll meet somewhere in the future, and I wish the victory to the Ukraine. And yeah, thanks again, Mikko, for your
Thank you.
support.
And I'd like to thank you, Yuri, for inviting me and for organizing this. And let me just repeat what I said in the end of my talk. This war will be over. We hope it's going to be over soon. And when it's over, Ukraine will rise and Russia will not. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And have a great day.